July 8, 1942. Sevastopol, Crimea. Dawn never truly breaks here anymore. The sky is a permanent haze of smoke and dust, a smothered glow that barely filters through the drifting ash. The air tastes metallic, acrid. Every breath carries the sting of cordite and pulverized stone. And in the shattered outskirts of Sevastopol's northern sector, where entire battalions have been erased in days, one figure lies motionless beneath a collapsed concrete lip of an old trench line. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, senior sergeant, sniper of the 25th Rifle Division. Her rifle, an aging Mosin Nagant M 1891/30 with a battered PU scope, rests steady against her shoulder. Mud cakes the wooden stock. Her cheek weld never shifts. She has not slept in nearly 24 hours, and she will not sleep for 70 more. Because this sector, this forgotten corner of the city, now depends entirely on her. The German push began before first light. A creeping barrage of Nebelwerfer rockets rolled across the ruined earth, screaming like tortured metal beasts. Pavlichenko felt the vibrations run through the concrete beneath her chest. Shards of plaster rained down. A support beam cracked somewhere behind her, giving way with a soft, defeated sigh. Then silence, brief, artificial, deadly. She listened. Boots. Dozens. Crunching across broken bricks and shattered glass. A coordinated advance, slow, deliberate, confident. The Soviets had pulled back overnight, forced to abandon the position after sustaining heavy casualties. Radio lines cut, reinforcements non-existent. What was left of her platoon, tired, bleeding, and short on ammunition, had been ordered to retreat and regroup near the secondary line. Pavlichenko was told to fall back too. She refused. "If they take this sector," she told Lieutenant Boris Kolesnikov, "they'll flank the entire ridge. Hold it for one more day, maybe two, and we buy the division enough time." Kolesnikov hesitated. He knew her record, 187 confirmed kills by then, though the tally was already outdated. He knew her stubbornness too. She was not reckless. She was ruthless, calculating. But this? One sniper against an entire German assault element? Still, he nodded. "One day," he said, "then you withdraw." But the line collapsed faster than anyone predicted. And now Pavlichenko lay alone, every instinct coiled tight. She spots movement through the smoke. A Feldwebel, German NCO, steps into view first, helmet low, MP40 slung. He scans the rubble ahead with quick, disciplined motions. Behind him, 4 riflemen fan out, Mausers raised. Pavlichenko exhales slowly. She becomes still, utterly still. The crack of her Mosin Nagant slices through the morning hush. The Feldwebel drops, a bullet through the eye socket, clean, final. The riflemen scatter, seeking whatever cover the blasted landscape offers. One dives behind a half-demolished wall. The second tumbles into a crater. The third ducks behind the charred remains of a burned-out truck. The fourth, young, terrified, makes the mistake of running back the way he came. She takes him before he crosses 10 meters. 2 shots in under 5 seconds. Her breathing never breaks rhythm. The Germans retreat for the moment, shouting orders, dragging their wounded, calling in supporting fire. Pavlichenko adjusts her scope, scans for machine gun teams, radio operators, reconnaissance officers. Her priorities are precise, deliberate. Killing riflemen slows in advance. Killing leaders stops it. She sees a radio antenna flicker behind a pile of sandbags. A shadow leans out. Headset, throat mic, clipboard. She fires. Another confirmed. But the Germans do not give up. By mid-morning, Stuka dive bombers scream overhead. Their sirens, Jericho trumpets, send tremors through the earth. Bombs fall in staggered sequences, kicking up plumes of dust that turn the battlefield into a shifting, suffocating fog. Pavlichenko covers her mouth with a scrap of cloth, fighting the instinct to cough. One noise, one shift, one silhouette. And sharpshooters could acquire her position instantly. She crawls deeper beneath the broken concrete lip, dragging her rifle like an extension of her arm. Her left knee burns, shrapnel from the earlier bombardment, but she ignores it. Pain sharpens focus. Pain reminds her she is still alive. A machine gun bursts somewhere to her right, MG-34, fast cadence. Tracer rounds whip over her hiding place. She waits, counts the seconds between volleys, times her movements. When the gunner pauses to reload, she rises just enough to see over the rubble. Her scope hovers, searching for the glint of metal or the movement of a loader. The pair are hidden behind a low embankment, shielded by a twisted steel beam, but they reveal themselves for a fraction of a second during the belt change. That's all she needs. One shot. The loader collapses. The gunner hesitates. Fatal. Second shot. MG-34 silenced. Her sector stays Soviet for another hour. Then another. Then another. Word begins spreading along the radio fragments that still function. Pavlichenko is holding the northern trench alone. The Germans can't break through. She's still fighting. Her name becomes a message, a warning, a promise. By sunset, the Germans launch another assault. Bigger, heavier, more determined. Pavlichenko adjusts her position once again, mud streaked across her cheek, fingers numb, but her voice steady as she whispers to herself. 3 days, she murmurs. I can give them 3. And on day 1, as night falls over Sevastopol, she's already become a symbol, though she doesn't know it yet. July 10th, 1942, Sevastopol. Day 3 begins with a sound no sniper wants to hear. Tracks, metal grinding against stone, heavy, measured, certain. Lyudmila Pavlichenko opens her eyes to a gray dawn, her body stiff with cold. The rain never stopped. It fell through the night, turning trenches into mud pits and filling shell craters like shallow graves. Her uniform clings to her like damp canvas. Her arms ache, her knee feels carved open, but she's still alive, and she has work to do. Her rifle rests across her chest, protected beneath her coat. She checks the chamber. Clean, oiled, ready. She wipes the lens of the PU scope with a dry patch of cloth she kept hidden beneath her tunic. The lens is fogged, but manageable. Another distant grind echoes through the ruins. This is no infantry patrol, no sniper team, no scouts. This is armor. The Germans are done playing. The sky brightens just enough to reveal shapes through the drifting smoke. Pavlichenko crawls toward a collapsed wall overlooking a small valley of rubble. Once a courtyard, now a graveyard of shattered stone. The air reeks of diesel, burning timber, and wet dust. She peers through a jagged gap in the concrete. What she sees forces her to blink twice. A line of German infantry, 40, maybe 50, moves in staggered formation behind 2 KFZs. 2 2-2 armored cars, their turrets scanning the ruins with sharp, insect-like movements. The light armor vehicles look like steel spiders, angular and fast. Behind them, she spots something worse. A flamethrower team. 2 men. One carrying the canisters, one carrying the nozzle. This attack is meant to burn positions like hers out of existence. Pavlichenko adjusts her position, settling the Mosin's barrel on a shattered window frame. Rain beads on the scope, but she wipes it again. Her breath steadies, her heartbeat aligning with the rhythm she knows from 100 hunts before this siege. One shot won't stop the vehicles or the infantry, but one shot can cut the head off the serpent. She sights the flamethrower operator, the one holding the nozzle. Target priority, highest. The man steps forward, turns, lifts his arm. She fires. The operator collapses instantly, the nozzle clattering to the ground. The second man screams and dives behind rubble. Chaos erupts. German infantry scatter, shouting. The armored cars rotate their turrets, searching for her like mechanical predators. She moves, instantly, rolling away from the window before the 20mm autocannon tears the wall apart. A burst of tracers rips through the stone, sending shards and dust in all directions. Pavlichenko hits the ground hard, coughing as concrete dust fills her throat. The armored cars fire again, sweeping the entire ridge with bursts meant to vaporize any remaining defenders. Her ears ring, her ribs ache, her knee throbs. But she is still alive. She crawls into a new position, a narrow slit between two collapsed beams. She steadies her rifle again, breath fogging the scope. The enemy infantry are reforming, advancing under cover. They think she's retreating. They think she's hit. Good. One German breaks cover first, a squad leader shouting orders, pointing toward her sector. She aims, shoots. He drops. Another soldier rushes to drag him to safety. She shoots again. 2 down. The armored cars continue to fire, but with each shot their pattern narrows. They're trying to locate her exact angle. She stays low, shifts again, crawling to a fresh vantage point beneath a slab of broken flooring. She's been moving nonstop for 3 days. But the battlefield is her shelter, her labyrinth. She knows every crater, every slope, every fragment of wall that can shield her for 30 more seconds. A machine gun team sets up behind a burnt-out truck. She fires into the loader's chest, then into the gunner's neck as he tries to take over. The German line pauses, just for a moment, long enough for her to breathe. Then she hears a new sound, low, heavy, grinding, a deeper engine, something larger pushing through the ruins. She wipes the rain from her eyes, sights down the scope, and sees it. A Panzer III. Its turret turns slowly, scanning the ruins like a predator that knows the prey is wounded, but still dangerous. The tank commander stands exposed in the open hatch, scanning with binoculars. He's her only vulnerability. But shooting him risks revealing her again, directly to the tank's main gun. She inhales slowly, exhales, centers the crosshair on the commander's temple. Her finger tightens. A shell slams into the rubble 2 meters from her. She's thrown backward, ears ringing, dirt raining down on her like a burial. Her vision blurs. Her mouth tastes of grit and blood. She forces herself to crawl, not away, up, toward another firing angle. One that gives her a line of sight, but keeps rubble between her and the turret. She braces the Mosin again, shoulder trembling, vision shaking. The tank commander stands again, shouting orders. She fires. The bullet snaps his head sideways. His body drops into the hatch. German infantry freeze. The armored cars hesitate. That single shot changes everything. Again. But behind the chaos, something else is happening in her line of hearing. A new movement. Footsteps. Soviet footsteps. Then, a voice. Close, urgent, familiar. Comrade Senior Sergeant Pavlichenko. Hold on. Reinforcements coming from the 25th Rifle Division. It takes her a second to process the words, a second more to believe them. 3 days alone. But her line has not collapsed. And now, for the first time, she is no longer alone. She grips her rifle, forcing herself upright against the broken wall. The battlefield roars with gunfire, engines, explosions. But her mind is calm. She held the line long enough for others to reach her sector, long enough to ensure Sevastopol would remember her name. Lyudmila Pavlichenko breathes out slowly. She still has strength. She still has bullets. And the Germans are not finished yet. Neither is she. Dawn of 29th August, 1941, crept over the battered outskirts of southern Odessa like a thin blade of pale steel. It cut through the lingering smoke, sliced across abandoned trenches, and revealed the quiet shapes of fallen men. The city was bruised, battered, but still holding. And on its most fragile northern edge, a lone Soviet sniper lay in the dirt, blinking against the gritty sunrise. Lyudmila Pavlichenko had not slept, not truly, not restfully, not safely. Her eyelids carried the weight of 1,000 half-blinks, micro-sleep stolen between rifle cracks and artillery thumps. Her fingers felt stiff, swollen around the wooden stock of her Mosin Nagant. And the cold had crept deeper into her clothes during the night, settling into her bones with the quiet entitlement of something that knew she could not escape. But she stayed. Her sector was still hers alone, and the Germans were coming again. She could hear them now, before they appeared. Boots scraping stone, low shouts, the dull clatter of equipment being passed forward. Infantry preparing for another push. Maybe reinforced, maybe desperate. A soft wind blew against her cheek. She caught the faint tang of burning tar from somewhere behind the Soviet line. A reminder. The city still lived. Civilians still hid in cellars, soldiers still dug in, commanders still prayed for their lines to hold. And she, the young 25-year-old sniper whose name was just beginning to circle through Soviet ranks, was the only barrier between this ridge and a German breakthrough. She exhaled slowly, settled her cheek against the cold stock, looked through the scope. Movement. 3 silhouettes crawling low, checking bodies, picking through the dead. They were looking for her, for the ghost who had turned this small patch of earth into a killing field. She didn't fire yet. She waited. Patience was her weapon. The Germans, confident that last night's bombardment had finished the job, moved with just a little more boldness than before. One rose to a half-crouch. There. Crack, he folded silently, dropping beside a shell crater. The others froze. Shifted fired wildly. Their bullets kicked up dirt in front of her. Tracer rounds skipped off broken stone. But Lyudmila stayed still, adjusting her breathing. As if her heartbeat was a metronome designed for war, she spotted a helmet rising just above rubble crack. Another dropped. Then voices, louder ones, calling for machine gunners. Footsteps scrambled. They'd figured it out. They knew she was alone. That made her more dangerous. Minutes later, she heard the metallic clack of a German MG-34 it had being set up. They were going to suppress the entire ridge, whether they could see her or not. A smart tactic, brutal, efficient. She murmured to herself the voice, hoarse and half-frozen. Just one more mistake. The barrel appeared first, then the helmet of the gunner. Crack. The gunner fell sideways, collapsing over the weapon before he could fire a single burst. Someone shouted in frustration. But now she had problems, because the Germans were adapting, and fast. A squad moved up the right flank, hugging ruined masonry, trying to close the distance. She could not stay prone. If they reached the ridge, if they got high ground, it was over. She forced her stiff limbs into motion, sliding backward over gravel and broken roots. Every movement felt like dragging a mountain. Her muscles trembled from dehydration. Her hands were raw, Her uniform was torn in 3 places. She had lived long enough in this tiny patch of earth to call it familiar, but today it felt hostile. Every bush, every stone was now a reminder of how exposed she was becoming. She reached a fallen beam, wedged upright like a crude wooden barricade. Behind it lay a shadowed hollow, barely enough cover for one sniper, but she had long abandoned modest definitions of sufficient. She dropped into position. A breath. 2. Then, a German soldier burst into view, sprinting toward her flank. Too close. Lyudmila didn't have time to properly aim. She fired from the hip. The bullet punched through his chest. His momentum carried him forward until he slid face first in the dirt, inches from her boots. Her hands shook, not from fear, from exhaustion. She could feel her pulse hammering in her ears, loud enough to drown out artillery miles away. She steadied herself, forcing her breathing into long, slow waves. She could not afford to lose discipline now, not after holding this position for more hours than she could count. Her body felt like it belonged to the ground, as if she was becoming a fixture of the battlefield, a half-buried shape with a rifle, indistinguishable from the debris except for the razor focus in her eyes. She pushed herself back up, scanning left. More Germans, a fresh squad, determined, advancing quickly. Too many to kill before they reached her. She needed angles, shadows, time, none of which she had. She crawled along the ridge's edge, dragging her rifle beside her. Dust coated her uniform. Pebbles cut into her palms. But she kept moving until she found the narrow split between 2 collapsed concrete blocks. A natural funnel. Only one soldier could pass through at a time. Perfect. Her rifle steadied. Her breath slowed again. The first German stepped into the gap. Crack. He collapsed against the wall. The second hesitated. Crack. The third dove for cover. She fired again and again and again, each shot accompanied by the dry metallic click of a bolt cycling, each kill buying her a few more precious seconds. Her world shrank to the size of a trigger pull. The war narrowed to a single duel between one woman and an entire advancing force. And she was not giving up the ridge. Not today. Not while the city behind her still breathed. Not while her hands could still hold a rifle. She lined up her next shot. Then, suddenly, shouts. Russian voices from her rear, reinforcements. Finally. A squad of Soviet infantry crested the slope, sprinting in tight formation, rifles raised, bayonets fixed. They saw her position, saw the bodies, and without hesitation joined the fight. Relief washed through her like warm water. But she didn't lower her rifle. Not yet, because the Germans were still trying to push, still determined to break the line. Lyudmila inhaled and fired one more shot into the smoke-filled gap. The ridge would hold, because she had held it, for 3 days. Alone. When the German push finally broke and their survivors pulled back into the hazy distance, the battlefield fell into a strange, suspended quiet. Smoke drifted across the ridge like low-hanging ghosts. Embers crackled from shattered timber. The distant rumble of artillery softened to a dull, steady heartbeat somewhere deeper in the city. Lyudmila Pavlichenko exhaled, long and uneven. It felt like releasing the weight of 3 entire days. She slowly pushed herself upright, her arms trembling under her own body. Dirt slid from her uniform in small avalanches. Her muscles protested every shift. Her cheek bore the red imprint of the Mosin Nagant stock. She blinked hard, trying to focus her vision. The world shimmered in waves, as if someone had turned the air into water. Her reinforcement squad approached her cautiously, almost reverently. They had heard rumors. Everyone had. The lone sniper holding the northern ridge, a woman whose rifle spoke with terrifying consistency. But rumors rarely prepared anyone for the real thing. Junior Sergeant Mikhail Kurnikov, barely 21 and still pink-faced from adrenaline, reached her first. "Comrade Pavlichenko, are you hurt?" She shook her head slowly. Not yet. Not truly. But her body felt like it was carved from stone. Cracked, weathered, barely held together. More soldiers arrived, stepping around the fallen Germans with quiet respect. They glanced at the bodies, not with disgust, but with a soldier's understanding. Combat was brutal. Clean shots were rare. Yet here the kills were precise, almost surgical. Most had died before they had even lifted their rifles. One soldier muttered under his breath, not realizing she could hear him. "Bose moi." She stopped an entire platoon alone. Another replied, "Not stopped, destroyed." She didn't want praise, she didn't want awe, she wanted water, and rest, and silence. But war rarely gave what people wanted. A captain approached, Captain Zaitsev of the 25th Chapayev Division. His uniform, though coated in dust, still held the crisp authority of command. He studied her rifle, the broken terrain behind her, the unmistakable tally written in bodies. "Comrade Pavlichenko," he said finally, "you held the line." His tone was not congratulatory. It was stunned. Lyudmila nodded, her voice dry. The ridge couldn't fall. He looked at her for a long time, as if trying to understand how someone who looked so young and so physically spent could have produced such devastation. Then he turned to his men. "Get her to the medics, now!" She raised a hand weakly. "I can walk." The men exchanged glances. One whispered something about stubborn snipers. Another chuckled softly. But she did stand. Slowly, shakily, but she did. The soldiers surrounded her, not to restrain, but to shield. As they began escorting her down the ridge, she finally saw the full scope of what she had defended. Below them lay the battered defensive lines of Odessa. Trenches zigzagging through scorched soil, sandbags torn open like ripped stitching, gun pits blackened by fire. Soviet soldiers looked up from their positions as she passed, whispering to one another, "That's her. The sniper. The one from the ridge." Word traveled fast in war. One soldier, bandaged across the forehead, even called out, "Comrade, how many did you get?" Lyudmila didn't answer. She didn't count during battles. Counting came later, when the adrenaline faded and the trembling began, when the weight of what she had done settled in. She continued down the slope until the medical station came into view, a makeshift tent behind a crumbling schoolhouse. The air smelled of iodine, blood, and wet canvas. Nurses moved quickly between cots, whispering to the wounded, checking bandages, lifting bodies in and out of the triage area. A medic stepped forward as she approached. "She needs fluids immediately, and rest." Lyudmila tried to protest, but the world tilted as soon as she opened her mouth. The medic caught her elbow and lowered her onto a cot. Cloth crinkled, metal rattled. Someone pressed a canteen to her lips. The water tasted like cold relief. She drank greedily, coughing once, wiping her mouth with a shaking hand. The medic examined her fingers, raw from the bolt action. Her shoulder, bruised purple where recoil had hammered into it for 3 days. Her eyes, bloodshot, distant but razor-sharp beneath the exhaustion. "You shouldn't be alive," he muttered. She didn't reply. She had heard that line before. Hours passed, or minutes. Time blurred. She rested with her rifle beside her, unwilling to let it out of reach. Around her, she could hear men discussing the renewed German retreat, commanders inspecting captured equipment, aides running reports back and forth. Then she heard something else. Voices outside the tent, hushed at first, then louder. Then her name, Pavlichenko. She held the whole ridge, 3 days alone. Over 300 confirmed. The tent flap opened again. Captain Zaitsev entered, carrying a folded map. He crouched next to her. "You should know," he said quietly. "Your defense saved 2 entire platoons. If the Germans had broken through that ridge, they would have flanked the city's northern trench. Odessa might have fallen days ago." Lyudmila swallowed her throat tight. She had done her duty, nothing more. Nothing glorious, just duty, Zaitsev continued. "Command will want a full report. They may even," she hesitated, "feature you in the unit bulletin." She stared at the tent ceiling. She didn't fight for headlines. She fought because the alternative was unthinkable. After a long silence, she spoke. "Will the ridge hold now?" Zaitsev nodded. "With reinforcements, yes." She closed her eyes. For the first time in 3 days, her muscles loosened. Her breathing softened. Her mind drifted, slowly, gently, toward sleep. Outside, Odessa continued to burn, guns continued to thunder. But the ridge stood firm because a young sniper refused to let it fall. And soon across the entire Soviet front, soldiers would whisper her name with something like, "Reverence Lyudmila Pavlichenko," the woman who held the line. Odessa never stopped shaking from artillery. Even in the quiet hours, those rare, fleeting pockets between bombardments, the ground seemed to remember the shells and tremble on its own. Smoke smudged the horizon like a permanent bruise. And yet, amid the ruin, whispers traveled, faster than gunfire. They all said her name now. Pavlichenko. Some said it in awe, others in disbelief. A few, especially raw recruits who hadn't yet seen the war's teeth, said it like a charm, something protective, something almost mythic. Lyudmila Pavlichenko remained in the medic station only 15 hours before insisting on standing again. The medics argued. Her commanding officers argued louder. But Lyudmila was stubborn in a way only a sniper could be. Quietly, absolutely immovable. War waits for no one. Outside the schoolhouse-turned-clinic, the smell of charred timber lingered in the air. Lyudmila walked slowly, her rifle slung over her shoulder, its wooden stock still bearing her cheek's faint imprint. She ignored the glances from soldiers resting along the wall. Some bandaged, some exhausted, all looking at her as though she were carved from a different material than they were. Perhaps she was. Perhaps surviving 3 days alone on a ridge did that to a person. Captain Zaitsev intercepted her before she reached the command bunker. "Pavlichenko, you can barely stand." Lyudmila adjusted her rifle. "I can shoot." His sigh came from deep in his chest. "Yes, I suppose you can." He motioned for her to follow. They walked through trenches, reinforced with scavenged planks and metal sheets. Mud sucked at their boots, cold and gritty. Water dripped from ruptured pipes overhead. In distant sectors, sporadic gunfire cracked like snapping bones. A soldier jogged past with an armful of rifle crates, nearly dropping them when he recognized her. "Comrade Pavlichenko," he blurted, then seemed unsure what to say next. Lyudmila just nodded and moved on. She was not yet comfortable with fame, especially the battlefield kind. The command bunker was dim and cramped. Lanterns flickered against concrete walls. Map tables were cluttered with grease pencils, field phones, open ration tins, and hastily scribbled reports. Officers crowded over a central map of the Odessa defenses. Major Kuznetsov, broad-shouldered and dust-coated, looked up sharply when Lyudmila entered. "So," he said, The ghost of the northern ridge walks again. She didn't smile. She wasn't sure she remembered how. He motioned to the map. Your stand bought us time to rotate the 133rd Infantry into new positions. The Germans pulled back to regroup. We expect them to strike again soon, likely east of your ridge this time. Lyudmila leaned over the worn paper. Her eyes flicked across the contour lines and red pencil markings. She traced the likely approach with a finger. If they come through this dip in the terrain, she murmured, you'll lose visibility in the southern trench. Kuznetsov raised an eyebrow. You can still think tactically after 3 days without sleep? Snipers don't sleep. They wait. The officers exchanged glances, equal parts concern and admiration. Kuznetsov cleared his throat. You're being reassigned. She lifted her gaze. To an expanded sniper detachment, he continued. Command wants you teaching recruits, training them, leading them. Her chest tightened. She hadn't expected that. She had imagined returning to the front line, rifle in hand, prone in cold dirt, scanning for enemy movement. She had imagined going back alone. Is that what you want? She asked. Kuznetsov hesitated, then shook his head. It's what the front needs. Your skill multiplied is more valuable than your skill alone. Lyudmila said nothing. Zaitsev stepped in softly. This city holds because of people like you. Help create more. For a long moment, she stood absolutely still. The bunker noise dimmed around her, staticky field phones, boots scraping against concrete, distant artillery. She thought of the ridge, the cold wind, the smell of spent powder, the echo of each shot as it rolled across the destroyed houses. She thought of the moment she'd nearly collapsed, and the hundreds of soldiers now alive because she hadn't. Finally, she exhaled. I'll do it, she said. Kuznetsov nodded once. Good. You start tomorrow. But the war didn't wait until tomorrow. That night, the Germans returned. It started with a single booming thud, the kind that vibrated fillings and teeth. Then another. Then a rolling barrage that flattened the skyline with fire and smoke. Searchlights carved through the dark like white blades. Machine gun bursts stitched across rooftops. Lyudmila grabbed her rifle before the lamps even stopped shaking. Outside, Odessa had become a storm. Soldiers scrambled through trenches, officers shouting over the thunder of artillery. Buildings crumbled in slow-motion silhouettes against muzzle flashes. Flames rose in the distance like burning towers. Zaitsev found her instantly. They're testing the eastern flank. Lyudmila adjusted her scope cover. Then I'll find a vantage point. You're still injured. I'm still a sniper. He didn't argue this time. They ran through the maze of trenches, racing past medics dragging wounded men into dugouts, past machine gun teams bracing their decked Yarevs, past mortar crews shouting firing coordinates. A shell burst nearby, too close. Dirt erupted around them. Zaitsev stumbled, grabbing the wall. Lyudmila didn't flinch. Her focus narrowed into a razor line. When they reached a sandbag outpost overlooking the eastern approach, Lyudmila dropped to a prone position immediately. She swept the horizon. Flames danced behind the ruins of a factory. Dark figures moved between shadows, shifting, testing, probing. German scouts. Zaitsev pointed. Enemy infantry, maybe a full company. Lyudmila steadied her breathing. Not if they don't get past me. The first shot broke the night like snapping ice. A German NCO fell instantly. Another shot, another collapse. Then another. The eastern flank did not break that night. because the sniper of the northern ridge was back on her belly, rifle pressed into her shoulder, breath calm as still water. But this time, she was no myth fighting alone. With every shot, soldiers around her steadied. Their fear lessened, their fire sharpened. Lyudmila Pavlichenko had become more than a sniper. She was a symbol, a force, a rallying point carved from grit and willpower. And as dawn crept over the burning city, she understood something she hadn't before. The ridge wasn't her greatest battle. It was only the beginning. The next morning, Odessa looked like a city dragged through the mouth of war. Smoke drifted through streets lined with shattered glass. Utility poles leaned at unnatural angles, wires hissing and buzzing like wounded snakes. The sun rose pale and weak, as if it was struggling to look at the destruction below. Lyudmila Pavlichenko walked through the trenches with her rifle slung over her back, her steps slow but steady. Soldiers paused as she passed. Some nodded. Some looked surprised she was still alive. Others straightened their posture as if her presence alone demanded it. She made her way toward a makeshift courtyard behind the remnants of a bombed-out factory complex. Here, rows of recruits waited. Dozens of them, some barely men, some already weathered by too many days under fire. Most had never held a sniper rifle in their lives. A few whispered when they recognized her. "That's her, the one from the ridge." 3 days alone? Is it even possible? Lyudmila stopped in front of them, boots sinking slightly into the mud. Captain Zaitsev stood nearby, arms folded, watching the new detachment with guarded optimism. She scanned the group, measuring them with the same steady gaze she used through her scope. Some flinched, some held her stare. One or two even smiled in nervous reverence. She began without ceremony. "Snipers," she said, "are not born. They are built." Her voice carried across the courtyard, calm, without theatrics. "You will learn patience, discipline, the art of seeing before being seen. If you fail, you die. If you succeed, your comrades live." She walked the line slowly. "You are not hunters," she continued. "You are shields with a long reach." She stopped beside a recruit with trembling hands, gripping an old Mosin Nagant rifle. "What do you see when you look at your weapon?" she asked him. He stiffened. A gun, Comrade Senior Sergeant." Lyudmila shook her head. "No, it is a tool, a pencil you use to write the enemy out of your city." A few recruits exchanged looks, surprised, perhaps inspired. She stepped into the center of the courtyard and lifted her own rifle. "This is an M91/30 Mosin Nagant," she announced, "with a PU optical sight. It is not elegant, it is not forgiving, but in the right hands, it is final." She rested the rifle against her shoulder and looked at the men. "By the time I am finished with you, you will understand exactly what that means." Zaitsev cleared his throat. "Targets are ready, Uister." Recruits turned as wooden silhouettes were raised in the distance. Makeshift German helmets, painted on cutouts, scavenged from crates and furniture. Wind tugged at them gently. Lyudmila motioned for the first group to step forward. A young woman with dark hair tucked under her cap approached. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes held fire. Lyudmila nodded approvingly. "Name?" "Private Irina Kozlova, Comrade Senior Sergeant." Lyudmila set Irina's stance, adjusted her grip, corrected the tilt of her cheek on the stock, and whispered, "Exhale, not with force. Let it leave you like fog." Irina fired. Her shot hit low. "Again," Lyudmila said. Irina fired a second time. The wooden German helmet splintered. Lyudmila allowed the tiniest smile. "Good." One by one, recruits took their positions. Some missed wildly. Some hit close. A few showed promise. But all of them watched Lyudmila as if waiting for her approval, as if she held the city's heartbeat in her gloved hands. When the training paused, Zaitsev approached her. "You're harder on them than you are on yourself." She didn't look at him. "War will be harder." Then, with a quiet intensity, she added, "If they hesitate, they die. If they misjudge distance by a meter, someone else dies. I won't let that happen." Zaitsev nodded. He knew better than to argue. By midday, gunfire from the training range blended with the real battle beyond the walls. The distant thuds of artillery rolled across the city like angry waves. Occasionally, dust drifted from rooftops as shells landed somewhere too close for comfort. But training continued. At one point, a terrified runner dashed through the courtyard, breathless. "German mortar team spotted. Sector 11. We're repositioning men." Lyudmila didn't miss a beat. She motioned to 4 of the better shooters. "Grab your rifles. You're coming with me." The recruits hesitated, glancing at Zaitsev for approval. He gave it with a curt nod. They followed Lyudmila through a broken alley, stepping over rubble, past burning debris, past a shattered tram half buried in a crater. The air smelled of cordite, smoke, and the metallic tang of blood. They reached a collapsed rooftop overlooking Sector 11. Lyudmila dropped to one knee, scanning the horizon. "See that ridge?" she whispered. The recruits nodded. "Mortar teams like elevation. Look for movement. Look for small groups, 3 to 5 men. Mortar tubes glint when the sun catches them. Shadows don't." She spotted them first. 2 German teams, 3 men each, setting up. Too slow, too exposed. "Targets," she murmured. "Left team, take them." The recruits readied their rifles, hands trembling. Lyudmila counted softly. 1, 2, 3. 5 shots cracked almost simultaneously. 5 Germans fell. 1 stumbled, trying to run. Lyudmila fired once. He didn't get back up. The recruits stared at her, not with fear, but with recognition. They understood now. The legend wasn't just legend. It was instruction. It was example. And as the smoke drifted away from their rifles, Lyudmila finally said words she had not spoken before. "Welcome to the sniper detachment." Behind them, Odessa rumbled with new artillery strikes. The city was far from saved, but now it had a new line of defenders. A line trained by the woman who had stopped an army for 3 days alone. The sun had dipped behind the shattered skyline of Odessa, casting long, jagged shadows across the rubble-strewn streets. Smoke rose in lazy, curling ribbons from smoldering homes, and the smell of burning wood and gun oil hung heavy in the air. Somewhere in the distance, a German artillery battery fired, the echo rolling across the city like a distant drumbeat. The battle was relentless, but Lyudmila Pavlichenko moved through it with a calm that seemed almost unnatural. She had become more than a sniper now. She was a symbol, a teacher, and a rallying point. The recruits, now more confident, moved alongside her. They had begun to anticipate her movements, mirroring her steps, keeping low, eyes scanning the streets for the slightest hint of enemy movement. Pavlichenko had taught them the art of patience, of observation, of controlling the chaos around them. She walked beside young Irina Kozlova, adjusting the girl's scope with a gloved hand. "Remember," she whispered, "patience is not waiting. Patience is knowing the exact moment to act. Hesitate once, and you may never get another chance." Irina nodded, the fear in her eyes replaced by determination. Around them, the city groaned under the strain of the siege. Roofs had collapsed. Streetcars were twisted hulks of metal, and the streets were pocked with shell craters filled with rainwater reflecting the darkening sky. Yet, despite the destruction, Pavlichenko's presence injected a sense of purpose into the scattered defenders. They reached a vantage point atop a partially destroyed building overlooking a narrow avenue. Through binoculars, Lyudmila scanned the street below. She spotted movement. A small reconnaissance patrol of Wehrmacht soldiers, 2 officers and 3 infantrymen, moving cautiously, rifles at the ready. She crouched, adjusting the scope of her rifle, the PU optical sight capturing every subtle motion. 2, 3, 4. She counted softly, training the recruit's eyes. Notice the rhythm. Soldiers move with a pattern. They always do. Learn it, predict it, exploit it. Irina raised her rifle, aiming carefully. The first shot cracked, precise, hitting the lead officer in the shoulder. He collapsed to the cobblestones, and the remaining men instinctively dropped to cover. Pavlichenko's teaching continued seamlessly. Now, flank the second group. Adjust your angle. Hold your breath. Exhale slowly. 1 shot is all you need. The recruits executed her instructions with a mix of precision and awe. Each crack of the rifle echoed across the city, a sound both terrifying and electrifying. The German patrol retreated, momentarily shaken, their morale fractured by the unseen presence of sharpshooters they could not locate. Pavlichenko's eyes never left the street. She knew that every life they spared in the city depended on their ability to control these small engagements, to stall the German advance. This was not a matter of glory. It was a matter of survival, of strategy, and of protecting the civilians still trapped in the ruins. Night fell fully, bringing with it a cold wind that cut through the tattered coats of the soldiers. Pavlichenko gathered the recruits in a dimly lit corner of the rooftop. The city below was silent for a brief moment, but they all knew the quiet was deceptive. Shells would soon scream overhead again, machine guns would chatter, and the enemy would test their defenses relentlessly. "You've done well today," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "But this is only the beginning. Being a sniper is more than hitting targets. It's about surviving long enough to see your comrades live. It's about making the enemy hesitate, making them fear what they cannot see." One of the young recruits, a wiry boy named Mikhail, spoke up, voice trembling with both exhaustion and awe. "Comrade Pavlichenko, you did this alone once. 3 days, without anyone else. How did you survive?" She looked at him, eyes sharp, unwavering. "I survived because I refused to fail. Because every shot I took, every breath I held, I thought of Odessa. Every life matters. Not mine, not theirs. Odessa's. That is how you survive." The recruits absorbed her words in silence. Each one understood that they were witnessing the transformation of a soldier into a legend. Pavlichenko had become more than a sniper. She had become the embodiment of resilience, of the city's unyielding spirit, and of the deadly effectiveness of a single determined individual in the chaos of war. Later, as the moon rose over the ruined rooftops, Pavlichenko crawled to her sniper nest, positioning herself in the shadows. The wind whispered through the broken windows and shattered walls. The city was quiet, but she knew better. Somewhere, German soldiers were plotting, moving, breathing, and she would be there, unseen, watching, waiting. The legend of the woman who had held off the enemy alone for 3 days now extended to those she trained. The sniper detachment was no longer a group of frightened recruits. They were a force, guided by her experience, her precision, and her unwavering courage. And for the first time in weeks, Pavlichenko allowed herself a brief moment to feel pride. Not for the kills, not for the legend, but for the new line of defenders who would carry the fight forward, even as the city groaned beneath the weight of war. The night stretched on, the only sounds the distant artillery and the soft, deliberate breaths of the snipers on the rooftop. Somewhere in the darkness, a shadow shifted. Pavlichenko tracked it instinctively. Her finger hovered over the trigger. Time slowed. One shot, one life altered, one enemy removed. She exhaled. The shadow disappeared. Odessa was still in flames, still under siege, but as the recruits trained, fired, and learned from her, hope glimmered amidst the ruins. The sniper who had once fought alone now commanded a new generation. And the Germans would soon learn that every corner, every street, every shadow could conceal death. The first pale fingers of dawn crept over Odessa, filtering through the skeletal remains of bombed-out buildings. The air was thick with smoke, dust, and the metallic tang of blood, lingering from last night's skirmishes. Pavlichenko crouched atop a fractured roof, her breath visible in the crisp morning air, eyes scanning the streets below. Every shadow, every movement was a potential threat. She carried her rifle like an extension of herself. Her trusted Mosin Nagant PU sniper rifle, scuffed but meticulously maintained. From her vantage point, she watched German soldiers advance cautiously along the main avenue, unaware that the city's most lethal observer was already tracking them. Pavlichenko's pulse was steady, her hands unshaking. She was alone in her nest for now. The recruits spread throughout the ruins, executing the tasks she had drilled into them. She observed young Anatoly Petrov, barely 18, moving like a ghost between two shattered walls, rifle ready, eyes sharp. "Good," she whispered under her breath. "Stay alive. See them before they see you." The Germans moved in small units, patrolling for stragglers, clearing buildings room by room. Pavlichenko selected her target, a squad of 5 infantrymen advancing across an open courtyard. She adjusted the scope, taking in the distance, the wind, the slight sway of her breathing. One shot, two. Precision, silent, deadly. By the time the squad realized what was happening, 3 of their number were down, and the remaining 2 ducked behind cover, their faces pale, eyes wide with fear. She exhaled slowly. Each kill was calculated, deliberate, not for glory, but for survival, for Odessa. She listened for the faintest sounds of movement, the creak of boots on rubble, the whisper of fabric, the distant roar of artillery. Every sound was a warning. Every silence was a chance. Hours passed. Pavlichenko rarely moved, conserving energy, scanning relentlessly. The city seemed to hold its breath. Civilians peeked from basements and makeshift shelters, watching the woman who had become both guardian and ghost. Her reputation had spread. The Lady Death of Odessa. Enemy soldiers whispered rumors of her, afraid to move through streets where the invisible sniper might strike. At midday, a sudden crack of rifle fire erupted from a nearby building. Pavlichenko's instincts kicked in instantly. She dove behind cover as bullets chipped concrete around her. Peeking out, she identified a lone German sharpshooter, taking aim from a shattered balcony. Pavlichenko returned fire, each shot calculated, precise, until the sniper slumped into the rubble. She didn't celebrate. There was no time for that. Odessa was under siege, and every German unit that faltered only intensified the threat. Pavlichenko moved to a new position, shifting her vantage point, weaving through rubble and shadows like a phantom. She adjusted her scope to cover a narrow street where supplies were rumored to be moving. The Mosin Nagant was her constant companion, her partner in a deadly game that only she seemed to understand fully. By late afternoon, a lull descended over the city. The distant rumble of artillery continued, but the immediate threat of foot patrols had eased. Pavlichenko gathered the recruits in a ruined courtyard. She pointed to the marks of the morning's engagement, explaining their successes and mistakes with surgical precision. "Notice the pattern," she said. "The enemy repeats what works. Watch, learn, and exploit. Survival is about patience, precision, and foresight. One misstep, and we lose more than a life. We lose morale. We lose Odessa." The recruits nodded, eyes wide, absorbing every word. Pavlichenko's teachings were no longer theoretical. Every lesson was lived, tested in the fire of battle. She moved among them, inspecting weapons, checking scopes, adjusting positions, correcting stances. She was teacher and soldier, mentor and guardian, a figure who embodied both the terror and hope of the city. Night began to fall again, and Pavlichenko returned to her rooftop position. The city below was a maze of shadows, the occasional flare lighting up crumbling streets. The Germans had learned to fear the invisible, the deadly, the unknown. And at the heart of that fear was one woman, perched above the ruins, watching, calculating, ready. She thought briefly of home, of her family, but pushed it aside. Odessa demanded everything, and she had given it her all. For 3 days she had held this sector alone, and now, with recruits beside her, the effort was multiplied, extending her reach, amplifying her impact. The legend was no longer solitary. It was a force, growing with each breath, each shot, each careful, deadly movement. The city groaned under the siege. But within the shadows, life persisted. Civilians moved cautiously, soldiers advanced with care, and Pavlichenko remained a silent sentinel. The Germans never knew where she would strike next, or who would follow in her footsteps. And in that uncertainty, Odessa found hope, resilience, and the unshakable will to survive. The first light of dawn revealed a city transformed by both destruction and resistance. Odessa's streets were littered with debris, splintered wood, twisted metal, shattered glass. But the enemy's advance had slowed to a crawl. Pavlichenko emerged from her rooftop perch, her eyes sweeping over the streets, taking stock of the aftermath. The Germans had underestimated the cost of each step, each movement through the ruins, and the legend of the Lady Death had grown with every encounter. She descended carefully, moving through alleyways and bombed-out courtyards. Her recruits were already at work, checking equipment, tending minor injuries, and reinforcing barricades. And dispatches carried accounts of a sniper whose accuracy Anatoly Petrov approached, carrying a small satchel of ammunition. "We held them off," he said, voice tight with exhaustion. "No losses this morning." Pavlichenko gave a brief nod, her mind already running through the next steps. "Good. But remember, the city isn't safe yet. The fight continues as long as the Germans think they can take these streets." Her thoughts drifted back to the 3 days she had spent alone, holding the sector with nothing but her Mosin Nagant, her wits, and sheer determination. Every moment had been a test of patience, courage, and resolve. She had watched soldiers fall, civilians tremble, and yet she endured. And now, with her recruits beside her, the fight had multiplied. Not in danger, but in hope. Odessa had become a symbol of resistance, a city unwilling to bow. and she had been at its center. News of her feats began to spread beyond the city walls. Soviet command took notice. Discipline and relentless presence had slowed the German advance, turned the tide in isolated sectors, and inspired a new generation of sharpshooters. Pavlichenko herself became a symbol, a rallying point for both soldiers and civilians. A reminder that courage could alter the course of battle. Even the Germans whispered rumors of the sniper who could appear from nowhere, strike without warning, and vanish into the ruins. Their morale suffered, not just from loss of life, but from the fear of an unseen enemy who seemed to anticipate their every move. Pavlichenko had become more than a fighter. She was a psychological weapon, her legend amplifying the effect of every shot fired, every sector held. By midday, the city settled into a tense rhythm. Civilians moved cautiously to collect supplies, soldiers patrolled, and Pavlichenko oversaw the coordination of defenses. She inspected barricades, adjusted sniper positions, and ensured that her recruits understood the importance of every detail. Wind, distance, cover, patience. Every element mattered. Every life mattered. As night fell, Pavlichenko returned to her rooftop. The ruins of Odessa were bathed in the soft glow of fires that hadn't yet burned out. The city was silent except for the occasional crack of a rifle or the distant thrum of artillery. She crouched low, her eyes scanning the shadows below. She had survived, but she knew the war would continue. Every street held danger, every building concealed potential threats. Yet in her heart, she felt a quiet pride. She had held the line. She had kept Odessa alive, and in doing so, she had cemented her place in history. The city slept fitfully beneath her, but Pavlichenko remained vigilant. She thought of the young recruits, their fear and determination mirrored in her own early days. She thought of every soldier she had guided, every German she had watched fall from the shadows, and every civilian who had found hope in her resolve. The battle was not over, but a legend had been forged in the rubble of Odessa, a testament to courage, skill, and unwavering determination. As the moon rose over the ruined city, Lyudmila Pavlichenko adjusted her rifle and scanned the horizon one last time. The war raged on, but for 3 days and countless nights beyond, she had held the line alone. Her story would live on, inspiring generations to come, a reminder that one determined individual could alter the course of history.